moving into Dabee territory. Dabee Farm is not too far away. This is the area where the Harrises settled, and Michael Jones came to work. We'll talk about the Harrises shortly. We are on the Rango Road, about 2 miles out of Ralston. We have just passed Ralston Cemetery. According to Shirley Tunnicliffe of Ralston Historical Society, Dabee Farm will be on the left. As it turned out, Dabee lay to the right at the bottom of the 2 peaks you can see over there. The roof of the convict-built shearing shed is just visible. The Cudgegong River flows close to the hills. Dabee is on this side of the river. All this area around here and over here over my right, it was all owned by the Fitzgeralds. Here's that shed. So this is Dabee Farm over here on our left. The area, the Browns and the Jones and the Wilsons and the Harrises cross paths. Now there you go, you can see Dabee over there on the shed.
Yeah.
Okay, this was the, can we go in there? Dabee. Okay, here we come. Oh, I don't think we can go. Okay, we'll stop here.
This is it. The famous and historic Dabee Farm.
We were excited to behold at last Dabee Farm, where my great-grandparents by 2 and Rogers by 3 came together. Michael Henry Jones, James Joseph Wilson, and the 2 Harris sisters, Elizabeth and Jane Harris. We were looking for 4 buildings: the historical shearing shed built by the convicts, the shearers' quarters, the shed with Dabee on the roof, and the farm homestead. But we were still not sure, despite our directions, that the building to the left was the historical shearing sheds, and the roof poking above the trees was the roof of the shearers' quarters. The trouble was that we could not see the true homestead from where we were. Roger thought the building closest was the homestead, and the shed with Dabee written on it, the shearing quarters. We decided to go ahead with the presentations and solve the problem later.
That could be the shearer shed, I'm not sure. Anyway, one of these buildings has been built by convicts, according to the historian.
Before Ralston Village was officially established in 1842, the area was known as Dabee, which was the name of Richard Fitzgerald's farm. Richard Fitzgerald was one of the original squatters of the Ralston district. For many years his farm was the centre of much social activity besides farming. At this point it's time to go back to Michael Jones to see what he's doing with himself. On the 20th of October 1834, Michael Jones received his certificate of freedom. He had served his 7 years and had no marks against him. Moreover, he was a good deal healthier, now standing at 5 foot 4 inches, 3 inches taller than when he arrived on the convict ship. He had the option of returning to the United Kingdom, but did not. He had plans, as his subsequent activities showed. During those 7 years, under the employment of a colonial landholder, Michael had got up valuable experience. The typical work of a assigned convict was clearing land, ploughing and harvesting crops, tending sheep and cattle, erecting fences, houses and farm buildings, and making butter, cheese and wine. Michael was not going to waste this expertise. And now at this point, we have to have a look at the Harris family. Before setting out to look for Bogee Farm on Glen Alice Road, we decided to venture down Dabee's driveway.
Got a second film running now.
Okay. We're just going to drive down here and see how close we can get without exciting too much attention. Now I think that building over there are the shearing sheds or the cattle sheds, and they originate from the time of the Harrises. The drive down Dabee's entrance avenue eventually showed us where the historical convict-built sheds, the shearers' quarters and today's homestead were. Being in the middle of the fields, it also gave us a good look at the ground where James Joseph Wilson, Michael Jones and Elizabeth and Jane Harris lived and worked. It was a special feeling, as if we were touching our great-grandparents by 2, by 3 and by 4. After all, Thomas and Patience Harris, the parents of the Harris sisters, were Roger's great-grandparents by 4. This close, there could be no doubt that these were the historical convict-built shearing sheds, and the shed with Dabee, a utility shed. And as we turned to come back, we found Dabee's homestead.
Residence over there.
Oh yes, I think it is too.
Turn around.
Yeah, that's over the sheds. That's the current homestead over there, the present owners. The field's full of cattle. There's a cattle area. The Dabee farm ran cattle. And one can imagine that James Joseph worked as a stockman amongst the cattle here, under the supervision of John Blackstone. Having driven the full length of the driveway, we've been able to establish what the buildings are. Over to my right, we took film of those buildings there. They are the historical stock sheds, the shearing sheds, the cattle sheds. And further over there seems to be another building for the stock. And the present owner's homestead is over here on my left. Okay. So it's been for us descendants of Michael Jones and James Joseph Wilson and the 2 Harris sisters, Elizabeth and James, this has been a enriching experience, as they say. Rather marvellous.
All right, we were probably a little bit naughty. We drove down the driveway of the Dabee farm. We actually were still sitting in the driveway, but it's been a bit of a breakthrough, I think. Pretty excited to see the old homestead and the new one. And yeah, I think we got some good stuff. So we're going to hit the road for, where are we going now? Bogee.
Property of Samuel Marston.
We're going to go and have a boogie at Bogee. Alright, over and out.
We are on Glen Alice Road. We see Mount Marsden ahead, which shows us where we're going. Bogee Farm is close by the mountain. We're travelling very close to the mountain range to go to Bogee. Right, we down in Bogee, and the directions we have got says that that's Bogee Farm over there. Over the ridge there, and it's still owned, well, it's still working. We've just crossed the creek there, and the directions are that the Bogee Farm was on the left, and that's over the ridge here. We can't see it exactly, but it's still a working farm, and it's where it was owned by Samuel Marsden, but he was dead by 1838, so it was his son who actually was responsible for it, Simeon Marsden. The farm is actually close by the creek here that winds around the hill there, but the farm is over the crest over there, and there's an entrance just there where we parked. But it's rather lush here, and we're passed by the those mountains over there. Actually, Mount Marsden is where we passed through the closely grown trees with the mountain on the left. That would have been Mount Marsden, named after Samuel Marsden.
And across the bridge. Oh, I don't get picked up by the mic.
Okay. A view from above on Google Maps shows that the present farm buildings are indeed over the ridge. This is the Bogee property of Samuel Marsden. Shirley Tunnicliffe showed us a batch of photos of the original buildings on the Bogee Farm property, which were in place until not so long ago. We see the typical slab and bark or shingle hut of the early pioneers. Corrugated iron has replaced the bark or shingles here. It's a great pity they were removed. Bark huts. Those marvellous photos.
I've got to stop there, I think. Yeah, I have to stop there.
Okay, good. Well, thanks for that. That's really
That's all right.
terrific.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think they're all. Yeah, they're all of
Good.
Elizabeth Harris was the daughter of Thomas and Patience Harris of the Wiltshire village of Samley. They were contracted by Charles Simeon Marsden, son of Samuel Marsden, for work on the Marsden properties. The family, including 9 children, departed on the Augustus Jessie on the 15th of June 1837. They set out from Portsmouth and arrived in Sydney on the 11th of October 1837. The Harris's first assignment was Marmbury Farm, one of Charles Marsden's holdings in the vicinity of present-day St Mary's, close to Penrith. In other words, in the same vicinity as the Bowman Farm. Thomas was contracted as a labourer on £30 a year, rations included. The Harrises did not stay there long because they were recorded on Samuel Marsden's farm at Bogee in 1838. Now, 1838 was a big year for Elizabeth and also for Michael. It was 4 years after he had served his sentence. And we shall go to that occasion in 1938. Behind me is Holy Trinity Church, Kelso, several kilometres outside of Bathurst. On the 27th of August 1838, 28-year-old Michael Henry Jones of Dabee, owned by Richard Fitzgerald, married Elizabeth Harris of Bogee, owned by Samuel Marsden, at this church. Michael signed his name while 15-year-old Elizabeth, barely 1 year in the colony, made her mark. The union indicated the mobility of the settlers in the Ralston district. Michael Jones had no trouble meeting his future wife on a farm 10 miles away at Bogee. Michael and Elizabeth's wedding at Trinity Church, Kelso, was one of the few occasions where we can have a clear picture of the time, place and date relating to our great-grandparents. It is here where Michael and Elizabeth entered the church with close family members and were married. We can see them emerging from the doors, here to be congratulated by family and friends. Bogee is around 60 miles from Kelso, so few of the Bogee and Dabee communities could be present. William White, probably Patient Harris's brother, and Margaret and Martha were the official witnesses, but it's likely Elizabeth's mother, her close younger sister Jane, plus a few more family were present for the first wedding of a Harris child. Michael may have had some friends from the Dabee community accompany him. From now on.
There's a car coming.
We're both wearing caps today because we got sunburned yesterday.
Yeah.
It's very sunny. After all the news about the floods, we've had 2 very sunny days.
Rain and then sunburn. You could either drown or get burnt in Australia. Well, back into the car.
By the early 1840s, the Harrises were well established in the Ralston district. From Marsden's Bogee, they moved to squatter Richard Fitzgerald Farm, Dabee, which is behind me, 6 miles east of Ralston. Robert was a son of Richard Fitzgerald. By 1844, the Harrises had established their farm, Never Never, at Kilgoola in the hills. They were now around 16 miles east of present-day Ralston and about 10 miles from Bogee to the south. John Blackstone, for whom James Joseph worked, was elected as a Mudgee district councillor. He was also resident and operated in the Dabee area variously as overseer or superintendent of the district landowners, including Fitzgerald's farm at Dabee. So James Joseph was Blackstone's stockman, while the Harris family were also working at Dabee. Because of their evident mobility, James Joseph had likely come into contact with Michael Jones and the Harris family shortly after 1840. The contact was well established by 1844, when in April Father James Dunphy of St Bernard's Hartley baptised several of the Harris children, including 15-year-old Jane Harris, at Dabee. Jane was the sister of Elizabeth Jones, née Harris. On the 21st of July, Jane Harris gave birth to James Patrick Wilson at Kelgoola. Father Dunphy returned the following year and married 16-year-old Jane Harris and 38-year-old James Joseph Wilson on the 3rd of February 1845 at Dabee on Kelgoola River. Just 2 days before the wedding, on the 1st of February, the granting of a conditional pardon came through, lifting all restrictions on James Joseph throughout the colony. During this time, however, Michael Jones had been looking for land in the Rylstone Bathurst district, but then on the 22nd of September 1845, he was granted the depasturing licence with partner James Joseph Wilson to the Combara run of 16,000 acres. It was a few miles south of Coonamble in the Bligh district, although Coonamble was not much of a settlement at the time. In 1846, the two families prepared to move from Dabee and Kelgoola to Combara. Okay. We are on the Castlereagh Highway heading for Coonamble. It is late in the afternoon and we have covered most of the 200 miles or 320 kilometres to Coonamble from Rylstone. We have passed Coonamble and have around 20 miles to go. The Castlereagh River is on our left. We can always tell where the Castlereagh River is because of the trees that run along its banks. The rest of the area is mostly treeless, the land being for sheep and cattle. Tomorrow we will see the river that flows between the trees. First, Michael and James Joseph would have travelled alone to their holdings. They could not bring their families to the naked plains without providing safe and secure accommodation. Apart from the natural surroundings of the grassy fields, the eucalypts, kangaroos, the Aboriginals, the nearby river, there was nothing there. Michael and James Joseph, like most settlers, had to start from scratch. They packed the necessary tools, a broad axe and a hatchet, and went on their way to the Combara Run, 203 miles from Rylstone. There they built their slab and bark hut in preparation for their wives and children. Sometime during 1846 and 1847, Michael and James Joseph loaded their bullock dray with their farming equipment and provisions and started on their journey. Their young wives, Elizabeth 24 years and Jane 18 years, and their children may have had the use of a spring cart. In 1847, Elizabeth had James 6, John 3 and Joseph 18 months, all born in the Rylstone area. Jane had James Patrick 18 months and was probably pregnant with the next child, Mary Ann. Their route would have been up along the present-day Castlereagh Highway, through Mudgee, Golgong to Dunedoo, then Mandurah to Gilgandra, up to Galagambone, and then on to their holding just south of Coonamble. If we calculate that they did not cover more than 10 miles a day, the journey took between 3 and 4 weeks. In 1850, James Joseph received the depasturing licence for Budgeon, the property below Michael's Combara, also 16,000 acres. We can tell when we are passing their holdings. James Joseph's Budgeon is situated where the Castlereagh River comes close to the highway. Michael's Combara is where the river is furthest from the highway until it narrows at its head on Warren Road. We will pass Warren Road not long before we enter Coonamble. Yes, we're coming now into Coonamble. There doesn't seem to be much of it. Percy Wilson, when he wrote about it in his memoir, said there wasn't much of it in the days that he knew it, which was in the 1880s. Here we are in what has been called the main shopping street of Coonamble. It's a little run down. It's 7 p.m, so one might expect the shopping street to be empty. There are two big old-style hotels here. It's strange that they both look abandoned. We've just come from the shopping street, so that's looking up. The Castlereagh Highway goes through there over the Castlereagh River. You can see the bridge there. There's another oldish hotel that's rather worn. In fact, everything looks a bit worn here. So here we are, we're on the bridge over the Castlereagh River. We've just come from that direction, and that's the Castlereagh River looking south. That brings us to the end of episode 3. In episode 4 we will see where James Joseph and Michael Jones and their families spent their most productive years.